What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. It's Thursday, April 10th, the end of the week for the Lori Daybell trial, day 4, wrapping up with some big witnesses on the stand that are very personal to Lori. I just want to thank everybody for coming on and watching the live feed. We have such a great group in there. I apologize that the feed went out a couple of times today. The Wi-Fi in the courthouse is very spotty, and we were all having some issues, but hopefully on Monday we'll be smooth sailing again. And I'm really excited that Law and Crime Network is going to keep me here throughout next week so I can bring you all the action that's happening inside the courtroom on some daily recaps of the trial and also some little YouTube shorts and some impromptu lives. So if you're not subscribed on YouTube, go subscribe. And if you want notifications of when I post new content or go live, hit that little bell icon. One thing that's been really special for me this week is having my daughter Taylor here with me. She started hearing about this case in the 8th grade, and she is now 19 years old. And she got to come to court with me today. It was amazing introducing her to this big media family, all of us that have gotten to know each other all of these years. And also last night we had to get together with a bunch of people. And so she finally got to meet these amazing humans that have just become like a second family to me. So very, very awesome. We're heading to the Grand Canyon tomorrow and Sedona on Saturday. So a little break from the darkness that is this trial. But let's jump into today's testimony. The first person on the stand was Lori's brother, Adam Cox. He is a pro pickleball player and also an instructor. In 2019, he was living in Wichita, Kansas. He goes through all of his siblings. He identifies Lori there in the courtroom and says that Lori and Charles were married for over 10 years. And since Charles's murder, Lori has married Chad Daybell. His son, Zach, lived with Lori and Charles after Colby, Lori's oldest child, moved out. He says that Charles helped raise Colby and Tylee. We know Colby has always said that Charles was the biggest influential father figure in his life, and that's who he considers to be his dad. Colby, by the way, in court today, and it was so touching to me after Kay was finished on the stand. He stood up and gave her a hug. Just seems like a great, great young man. He's lost so much. Charles has 2 sons from a previous marriage, and then he and Lori adopted JJ together. Lori and Charles also lived in Hawaii and Texas during their marriage. Adam said he was somewhat close to his brother Alex. And as far as Alex and Lori, growing up, they just had a normal sibling relationship, but got a lot closer that last year and a half before everything started happening. And he said it was oddly close. Charles and Alex had a very normal brother-in-law relationship. They would have big family events together, and Adam said they grew up in the LDS church. Alex was excommunicated twice as an adult, and back in 2019, he was still excommunicated. Adam tells the jury, when you're excommunicated, that means the church takes away your membership and you can't go to temple, which is a big deal in the LDS faith. Adam and Charles would text and talk on the phone. He said when Lori and Charles were married, Charles would pay for things for Lori's family, like cell phone plans and car insurance. He says Charles sold insurance and traveled a lot for work throughout his marriage to Lori. Before Lori and Charles got married, she was a hairdresser, but after the marriage, she didn't work. He learned Lori and Charles were having marital problems, and so he and Charles started talking about the root of those problems. A lot of it had to do with the fact that Lori's beliefs were outside of the LDS religion, such as she was translating from a mortal to an immortal human. Lori would say she was married to Moroni in a past life. She told Adam she had more priesthood authority than the priest. And he explains in the LDS religion, the men hold the priesthood, but Lori said she was in a state where she was above that. Adam didn't understand it, and it was all very strange. But he didn't confront her about it. He let her say what she wanted to say, and she asked Adam if he thought she was crazy. He said, I don't know if you're crazy, but what you're saying isn't true. After that, she stopped talking to him. He later found out she believed people could be dark or possessed by evil spirits. He tried to tell his family about these strange beliefs, but they said she's in a delusion and she'll come out of it at some point. His family basically cut him off. At the end of June in 2019, Charles sent the email that Lori wrote to Chad pretending to be Charles, asking him to come to Arizona to help ghostwrite this fake book. Adam explains that Charles was a minor league baseball player and the book was somewhat based on this. Adam believed Lori was having an affair with Chad, and that's something that he and Charles talked about. Charles thought he could get Lori back into more mainstream LDS beliefs and thought she was going overboard. She was going to temple 5 times a week, which is not normal. So Charles thought if he could get her temple regimen taken away, she would come back to normal. And then he and Charles started talking about an intervention, maybe recording her, giving it to the stake president. So Charles asked Adam to help him. So July 9th, 2019, Charles said he would fly Adam out to Arizona to help with this intervention. Adam asked his brother Alex if he could stay with him, and Alex said yes. Adam was flying into Phoenix on July 10th. As soon as he landed, he texted Alex but got no response. He tried calling, nothing. Adam said that was unusual. He ended up staying with his parents. Adam knew Charles was also flying in on the 10th, but they didn't see each other. On the morning of July 11th, when Charles would be murdered, Adam wasn't expecting to get together with Charles, but he got a text message when Charles drove up to the house to pick JJ up for school. That text message, Al is here. Adam thought something weird was happening. He was a little concerned that Alex was there. Adam also knew that Charles had reached out to both Chad and Tammy Daybell separately about his suspicions of the two of them having an affair. On July 9th at 9:11 a.m., Adam got a message from Charles where he suggested getting everybody together without Lori knowing to stage this intervention. Adam thought he would go see Lori at her house and keep his phone on record as they talked. Charles thought Lori would leave, but said it was worth a try. Still on July 9th at 1:13 p.m., Charles texts Adam to let him know that his flight is booked and said he's uneasy about how Lori is going to respond to all of them. Adam tells the jury that Lori left when Charles tried to serve her with divorce papers and nobody knew where she was. And Charles was worried that was going to happen again. Charles told Adam he would get JJ and take him to school. They talked about bringing a second phone to hide and record and having Adam put his phone on the counter so maybe Lori wouldn't suspect anything. Adam said Charles was just desperate to try to shake Lori loose of whatever spell she was under. July 10th, the day before Charles's murder. At 3:34, Charles sends Adam a text and asks if he's in Phoenix yet. Charles said he had a meeting, but he would try to touch base before he went to see Lo, meaning Lori. Adam assumed that he and Charles would meet up later that day on the 11th, but they really didn't have any plans. They show the text message between Charles and Adam where Charles says Al is here at Lori's, and that was shocking to Adam. Adam responded, "I wondered why he never called me back. They're planning something." He said Alex wasn't answering anything the day before, text messages, phone calls, and it was suspicious, especially with Alex being at Lori's that morning. It made him feel like something was just really off, and Charles agreed. Adam told Charles in that text thread that he was supposed to stay with Alex, but Lori probably blocked that. And the last text message Charles Vallow ever sent was to Adam saying, "What you do is up to you." Adam said he was upset with Alex for ghosting him and also being at Lori's. So he texts Charles, "I'm going to pressure him to come get me. See what he says." Of course, no response, but that message was read at 12:13 p.m. And at that point, Lori and Alex had Charles's cell phone. I'm sure they went through everything they could in that phone before they handed it over to law enforcement later. At 7:49 a.m., and this is after we believe Charles has been shot and killed, Adam texts Charles, me and Zach are going to the state to play basketball. Holmes is there and says he would try to catch him to have a conversation about Lori. This was originally Charles's plan to get the bishop or the stake president to hear these things Lori's talking about and getting that temple recommend taken away. But Holmes wasn't there that night. Adam didn't know Charles had been shot. Nobody in his family told him, and he didn't hear from Charles. He decided to go visit a friend in Tucson, and his son Zach came along. He told his friend Eric that it was fishy he hadn't heard from Charles. He didn't know if maybe he and JJ were busy or if Lori and Charles had reconciled and Lori told Charles not to talk to Adam. Remember, back in April, they briefly reconciled while Lori was getting Charles's finances in order. Adam said Charles had asked him not to tell anyone about the plans for the intervention, and he didn't. Charles was worried that Lori's family would try to stop it. So he starts talking to his friend about Charles, and the friend Googles Charles's name, and they find out Charles had been shot and killed by Alex. Adam said it was one of the worst feelings in his life. He knew Alex carried guns and went shooting on a regular basis. Now, Adam has taught Sunday school, and the state asks Adam to explain the story about Nephi. He is a prophet in the Book of Mormon. He is a humble, faithful servant of the Lord, and his brothers tried to kill him at one point. Nephi ended up going to Jerusalem to get plates back, but he was run off. He went back again because the Lord asked him to. King Laban was laying on the ground drunk, and Nephi was told by God to kill Laban, and he did, and it was a justified killing. I think the Nephi-Laban reference is going to come in when the text messages between Lori and Alex, Lori and Zulema, all those guys come in at some point during this trial because this is referenced as a Nephi and Laban ending, referring to Charles's murder. Adam knew Lori had told people Charles was possessed and was a dark spirit. But after Adam learned Charles had been killed, and by the way, it wasn't until 2 days later, he cried. He didn't know what to do. He got angry, and he called Kay Woodcock. He said he only trusted her. Adam then called his mom and asked what was going on. And she said, "You tell me what's going on." He said they needed to talk. So he and his son Zach came back to Phoenix and went over to his parents' house. But the conversation did not go well. He said he stuck up for Charles, and it caused issues with most of his family. He and Zach left and stayed at his sister Summer's house, and the next day they left for home. He said after this, he didn't talk to his mother for a long time. On cross, Lori, how long has it been since we've seen each other in person? Adam doesn't know. Lori, a year, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8. Adam, something like that. Lori, did you see me at Colby's wedding in January 2018? Oh, you didn't come to his wedding. Adam, no. Did you see me sometime that year? Adam says yes, in 2018. Lori, were we eating my green chili chicken enchiladas? Do you remember that? I made it every time we got together. They must not have been the most memorable enchiladas, y'all, because Adam was like, I don't remember that. Lori, it's 2025 and we haven't spoken in about 8 years. And Adam agrees. Lori, up to that point, how often would we communicate before 2018? Adam said 1 to 3 times a month in a call or a text. Lori, you know, we lived in Hawaii, you were in Kansas, and with your career, you lived in a lot of places. Austin, Dallas, New York, Wichita, Sacramento. Am I missing any? I was in Texas, Arizona, and Hawaii. Would you say we were not physically close in the last 20 years? And Adam agrees. Lori, Mr. Cox, did you see with your eyes, hear with your ears, or witness me conspire with my brother Alex to murder my husband, Charles Vallow? No, nothing further. On redirect, the state asks, have you talked to your sister since Charles was killed? No. You cut off all communication? Yes. You were asked about 2018, being at Charles and Lori's house when Lori told you she was becoming a celestial being and other ideas not in line with the LDS faith. When you told her that her beliefs weren't true, was that the end of you talking to your sister? Yes. Were you there the morning Charles was shot? No. Were you supposed to be with Alex on the 10th? Yes. Adam said Charles was going to pick up JJ, and she asked, is it odd that Alex would bring a loaded gun with an extra magazine into the house where JJ was? Lori objected, but that was overruled. Alex said it did stand out to him and it seemed extreme. Adam told his family he thought Lori and Alex conspired to kill Charles because Lori was telling people Charles was no longer living and a zombie was living inside him. Alex was at the house that morning and Lori was talking crazy. So once he found out Charles had been shot and killed by Alex, it all added up. He said he has no doubt in his mind they killed him. Up next, Sarena Sharpe. In 2019, she lived in Connecticut and moved to Arizona at the end of July or the beginning of August 2019. She is LDS and has attended 2 Preparing a People conferences. These conferences are meant to help for emergency preparedness and also the second coming of the Lord. She attended one in November 2018 in Arizona. She knew Melanie Gibb from phone conversations, and she also knew Jason Mao. They both invited her to stay in their homes, and she planned to stay with Melanie Gibb. Melanie Gibb offered to pick her up at the airport, and when she did, they ended up and stayed at Lori's. At this point, Sarena had never heard of Lori. She identifies Lori in the courtroom and says a lot of people stayed at her house that weekend. She mentions Lori, Melanie Gibb, and Chad Daybell. She talked to Chad over that weekend, and she did talk to him some after that. She saw Chad at another Preparing a People conference in February 2019 in Idaho, and she had thought about moving to Rexburg and met with Chad to talk about possibly moving there. She was house hunting with a realtor, and she knew Chad was married at the time. She knew Lori was married at the time, but she had no idea Lori and Chad were having an affair. After that weekend, she kept in touch with Lori, and Zulema invited her back out to Arizona in March of 2019 for a girls' weekend where they would all stay at Zulema's house. She had met Zulema at the first Preparing a People conference in November 2018 in Arizona. The girls' weekend was Lori, Melanie Gibb, Zulema, Christina Atwood, and Nicole. During this girls' weekend, Lori talked about her not needing to repent anymore, and Sarena said that was shocking. Fast forward to April 2021, Sarena had a police interview with the Chandler Police Department and mentioned to them that Lori said, "We don't need to repent. We've come to that stage," meaning all of them. She also mentioned Lori would talk about people being light and dark, and Lori would say she was changing physically, like being filled with more light and knowledge to be closer to God. Lori also talked about castings on more than one occasion, and at least on one phone call. Back to that girls' weekend in March 2019, Lori asked them to do a casting for Charles. When asked if she ever met Charles Vallow, she said it was very quick. He was coming home and she was leaving. She thought it was unusual to do a casting for a specific person. But Lori talked about Charles being possessed by an evil spirit named Ned. The witness said she was questioning things and asked a lot about the repentance and talking to other ladies about casting out in a group setting. But Lori said Charles was no longer Charles. He was possessed. She heard Lori use the term zombie, and that stuck out to her. One evening, Lori asked the group to cast out the evil entity. But as usual, once Christina started questioning Lori, Lori started to distance herself. After Sarena moved to Arizona, she saw Lori maybe 2 times. One was when Zulema organized a girls' lunch to welcome her to Arizona. Alex was with Lori. Sarena did say hello to Lori, but Lori sat away from her. The other contact she had with Lori was at the end of July or early August. Lori invited the women to her house for a talk. Charles had just been killed, and Sarena had heard vague things about what happened, but nothing in particular. There were several women at the house, and she thinks Melanie Gibb was one of them. She said Lori's demeanor was stoic. There was no mourning or crying. And after that, she didn't see Lori again. Maybe they texted a few times with Sarena just checking in to see how Lori was doing, but she didn't know that Lori had married Chad or anything until after. Lori on cross, and she came in hot with this one. Did you take an oath when you came in? Yes. Did you raise your hand? Swear to tell the truth? The whole truth? Nothing but the truth? So help you who? Sarena says God. Can we agree your testimony here will be accountable to God? Objection sustained. Your Honor, they brought up the religion. Sustained. Do you believe your testimony will be accountable to God? Yes. Lori says, okay. How many times did we meet in person? Sarena says 4. How many one-on-one conversations did just you and me have? Sarena said maybe 3. How many times did we communicate over the phone? Sarena, multiple. Like more than 10, less than 10? The witness said more. Lori, more than 20? Sarena doesn't know. Lori, would it be fair to say some of the things you remember are from other people and not from me to you directly? The witness says perhaps. When you said I mentioned to you about zombies, I'd like to know verbatim what I said. The witness said that was when we talked in 2019 at the girls' weekend. Lori, I mentioned zombies out of my mouth. You're saying under oath, I said the word zombies at that meeting. The witness said to the best of my recollection, but that was 6 years ago, and I don't remember verbatim. Lori, is it possible someone else could have mentioned zombies and I was there? Or I want to know the sentence I said to you about zombies. Objection sustained. Lori, who are the 3 Nephites in the Book of Mormon? The witness is like, I don't know off the top of my head. Lori, you don't know who they are? No. Do you know of John the Revelator being translated? The witness does not remember that. Lori, what about in the Old Testament? Elijah, was he translated? There was an objection, but the judge overruled that. And Lori said, I've been accused of being out of the scope of the LDS religion when I was in the scope. Was Elijah translated? The witness says yes. Lori, the 3 Nephites as well. I didn't ask their names. I said, do you know who they are? Yes. Lori says it's not uncommon in the Christian belief system to believe people can be translated. And the witness said, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that for all of Christianity. Lori, do you believe in the Bible? Elijah was translated, so that wouldn't be out of the scope of what to believe. And the witness agrees. Lori said, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you. Lori, the girls' weekend, what did we do besides one prayer? The witness said temple, went to lunch. Lori, so out of the 72 hours we were together, 5 minutes we spent praying. How long would you say the prayer was? The witness doesn't know. Lori, a tiny portion of our whole weekend? Yes. How many communications have you had with Christina Atwood over the last 5 years? Like how many? The witness said, I don't know. Weekly for sure, sometimes daily. Lori, has your relationship grown with Christina? Yes. Are you related as in-laws? No. Lori says, I wondered. I didn't know. Are you in contact with Zulema? No. Kay Woodcock? The witness, I don't know who that is. Do you talk to Nicole? She says weekly, sometimes daily. Melanie Gibb? No, but I do run into her on occasion. Lori, you said, I believe I don't need to repent, and you were shocked. What exactly did I say? The witness said you didn't need to repent. I don't know exactly what you said, but we didn't need to repent. Lori, what was the context? How would that come up? Sarena says, I don't remember the context, but I definitely remember that comment. Lori, from me specifically, yes, I think in front of all of us. Lori, why would I be the one speaking? Was I teaching a class? The witness said sometimes we all would speak. Lori, you said something about being uncomfortable that weekend with some of the topics. Why didn't you just leave? Sarena says, I was there with friends and I'd flown across the country. I didn't feel I needed to leave. Lori, you're a grown woman. You have your own ideas. You didn't disagree at the time, but looking back now, you disagree? The witness says, I don't think that's a fair comment. Lori, fair to say we had a good time that weekend and now you've changed your mind a little bit? The witness said, we did have a good time, but changed my mind about what? Lori said, what made you feel uncomfortable? The witness said it didn't change her mind. Lori, you were interviewed by police twice. By who? She said, a detective came to my home and that was Nate Moffat. When? Spring of 2020. Lori, how long was the interview? An hour, maybe less. Who was your second interview with and where? She doesn't know the investigator, but it was at the Chandler Police Department, and that one was longer, maybe an hour and a half. Lori says, what did you have to contribute for that long with someone you met 3 times? Objection sustained. What were they interested in you telling them? Objection sustained. What did you tell them about me in those interviews? Objection sustained. Do you feel you have something to offer here with the crime I'm charged with? Objection sustained. Did you see me, hear me conspire with my brother Alex to kill my husband, Charles Vallow? No. On redirect, the state just points out you didn't keep tally marks of how many texts or calls you had with Lori. And on the girls' weekend, Lori said you did a prayer. Was there more than one prayer over the weekend? The witness said, I assume we prayed over food and things like that. The state says, but it's different to pray the demon out of Charles Vallow, and the witness says correct. Next up was William McDonald. He is retired from the Chandler Police Department. He now teaches criminal justice to high schoolers. He is in digital forensics. He just went over the software he uses and the process for extracting data from cell phones. The next witness, Marissa Francisco, she is a forensic scientist who works in latent prints. They bring in the baseball bat that was swabbed for DNA and prints. She looked with a flashlight and saw 2 impressions. It was determined both were no value for identification. They don't test unless they're asked to, but she was asked to compare what was on the bat to Charles. Both were inconclusive. And by inconclusive, meaning it just wasn't a good enough print to say it was or wasn't Charles's fingerprint on there. On cross, Lori asked if the DNA was ever tested, and she doesn't know. The Chandler Police Department doesn't have the ability to test that DNA. It's sent to the state lab, and that was the last time she saw it when it was sent off. The last witness of the day, Charles Vallow's sister, JJ Vallow's grandma, Kay Woodcock. She goes through the 6 siblings. She was very close to Charles. Kay identifies Lori. She says the defendant there in the black jacket. Charles and Lori eloped to Las Vegas in 2006, and they didn't have a reception. They just had a family gathering in March of 2006 at a ranch in Austin, Texas to celebrate the wedding. She says Charles has 2 boys from his previous marriage, and their names are Cole and Zach. Charles approached Kay about adopting JJ. Kay really wanted to think things over, and Charles just told her to keep it in mind. But they did adopt JJ in July of 2014, and he was 2 years old at the time. She tells the jury JJ was autistic and he was born 10 weeks early. In July of 2019, JJ was 7. July of 2019, Lori said she had 5 kids she was taking care of. She mentions this in that text message to Kay after she found out she wasn't the beneficiary, but Kay says there weren't 5, there were 2 kids Lori was taking care of. Charles's 2 sons, grown adults. Colby, grown, out of the house. That left JJ and Tylee. She said Charles was the best dad. He doted on JJ And once JJ got used to flying, he loved it. And they would come visit Kay and Larry in Louisiana. Charles sold annuities and he was a financial planner. She said he was gone sometimes 3 or 4 days a week for work, and he was very meticulous when it came to paperwork. Lori did help Charles with his job, but Kay doesn't know exactly in what capacity. Prior to Charles being a financial advisor, he was drafted into the minors by the Houston Astros. He was a left-handed pitcher and he batted left-handed. Lori was shaking her head no during this testimony. But Charles injured his knee and that ended his baseball career. Their family was not LDS, but Charles did convert during his marriage to Lori. Charles and Lori lived in Chandler, Arizona, Gilbert, Arizona, Hawaii in 2014. They moved back in early 2017 to Arizona. They met originally in Texas. 2018 to 2019, Charles and JJ were coming to visit on a regular basis. In March of 2018, they had a death in the family, Kay's mother. Charles came for the funeral, but Lori did not. Kay's husband, Larry, felt like something was going on there when she didn't come. Kay said she thought it was appalling that Lori would not come support her husband when his mother had passed away. Kay said she was on the phone all the time for her job and she hates to talk on the phone. And her and Lori really were never big about talking on the phone. They would randomly text, but Charles would keep Kay up to date on what was happening in their lives. Kay said when her and Lori were together, it was like they hadn't missed a minute. She said Lori's outgoing, very friendly. She's easy to talk to. So she said they got along well. And Kay said, I loved her. In October of 2018, Charles and JJ visited for the weekend there in Lake Charles, Louisiana. November of 2018, Kay, Larry, their granddaughter went to Vegas and Charles and JJ met them there for Thanksgiving. But she thought it was odd. Charles said Lori or Tylee was sick, and Charles wouldn't share much about what was going on at that point. She said, but when he did, he unloaded it all. In 2018, Kay had some concerns about Charles and Lori's relationship, especially as often as Charles was coming to visit. He seemed very unsettled, but wouldn't say why. In 2019, they saw Charles more. She said Charles was concerned for his safety. Lori sent Kay a text that Charles and her were fighting and that she and Tylee and JJ were at a hotel. Charles reached out to Kay and she said he was a mess, so she came out to Arizona and he was by himself. Once she was there, she found out there was a huge problem in their relationship. She said this was around the 1st of February 2019. Charles talked about his concerns for his safety, and Kay did not see Lori on that trip. And nobody would tell Charles where Lori was. This is that period of time she disappeared. JJ was with Charles. Kay said one of the reasons that Kay came out to Arizona was just to help with JJ, and she said Charles was very broken. As far as they knew, Tylee was staying at Alex's house and Lori was gone for 58 days. Every day, Charles would tell Kay how many days it had been since Lori had been gone. Kay stayed here a lot, but would fly back and forth. But by the end of March, they moved Charles to Houston. Charles said Lori did not want JJ anymore. Kay explains Houston is about 2.5 hours away from where she and Larry live in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And so she was able to come help when Charles went out of town for work. At this point, Kay starts helping with Charles's business. Again, Lori shaking her head no. Kay changed passwords on Charles's accounts so that Lori couldn't access it. They were packing Charles up to go to Houston and Lori shows up. Kay said she was in the pantry packing things up and something caught her attention. Lori had her back to Kay. Now, Charles was on his phone and initially didn't realize Lori was there. But he looked up and saw her and he started crying. And Lori started yelling. Why did you take JJ out of school? Why are you moving? Kay says there have been no contact with Lori for 58 days. She said Charles was soft spoken, and again, Lori shakes her head no. Lori did calm down a bit and they talked for a while and they moved to the bedroom to keep talking. Lori would get loud at times, but Kay was sitting at the dining table and Lori came up and stood next to her and said, I love you, KK. Kay said, I love you too. I'm sorry this is happening. Lori started crying and walked off. The next day, somebody came and got Tylee's belongings. Kay took JJ back to Louisiana with her, and Larry kept JJ for a week while Kay helped Charles pack up and drive back to Houston. Charles drove the U-Haul. Kay drove his pickup truck. Larry then brought JJ to Houston. Kay said Charles was not trying to take JJ away from Lori, even though she didn't want him anymore. And Kay said, I just couldn't understand it. But Charles wanted JJ to be in Lori's life. March 28th, Charles says, we're moving to Lori. You're welcome to come. I'll fly you out on Sunday. But Lori said she couldn't. She was going to Hawaii, and then she may come to Houston in a couple of weeks. She was gone a total of 72 days. But after that, Lori and Tylee moved in at Charles's place in Texas, but she said Lori slept in JJ's room with him. Kay mentions that Charles was receiving a commission check of $125,000 and Lori knew that. She was there just a few days before that check was to be deposited. Kay had access to Charles's bank account. Lori stayed in Texas through towards the end of May, but she was also traveling. Kay found out Lori left Houston and went back to Arizona, and JJ went with her. Charles stayed in Texas. Charles paid for a house here in Arizona for Lori, JJ, and Tylee to stay in. Kay and Charles did talk about that life insurance policy, and she thinks that was in early February. Charles said he was going to take Lori off as the beneficiary and put Kay down. She said it wasn't a long conversation, and Kay did not know that he actually did it until she got a call after Charles was killed. Kay said if something had happened to Charles and Lori wasn't around, then JJ would have come to live with Kay and Larry. Kay last saw Charles in June. He came to Lake Charles for the weekend. The last time she saw JJ was May 18th. Charles last texted Kay the night before he was shot. He just said, I'm going to be in Phoenix to see JJ, asked how things were going, said he was boarding the plane, and told about some of the plans he had. Kay had no clue about this intervention. She knew that Charles and Adam were close, and whatever he was doing, Adam was a part of it. Kay said she knew Charles was in good hands with Adam because Adam loved Charles. She found out Charles was dead July 12th. She was at a nail salon with her granddaughter. She got a call from Charles's son, Cole, who had gotten a text from Lori saying Dad's dead. Kay said, that can't be true. Have you tried to call? Cole said Lori wouldn't answer. So Kay called Larry. He looked it up online, called Kay, and said it was true. Alex killed him yesterday. Kay breaks down on the stand understandably and said she had to call all of her siblings to let them know. She didn't know what to do. She did call Cole back to let him know it was true that Charles was dead. She said the two of them agreed to keep in touch if one or the other learned anything new. She tried calling and texting Lori, and at some point, Lori texted Kay, I'm having to deal with a lot of stuff, but too busy to call his family to say he was dead by her brother killing him. Kay and Larry called a detective in Chandler, Arizona, and Kay said they arranged a flight to come to Arizona. She needed to know where JJ was, what he had seen, and she knew this wasn't good. But they had to meet with the detective before really pursuing any communication with Lori. Kay told Detective Moffat about the life insurance policy. She did not know if he had changed it to her as the beneficiary like he had talked about doing. And Kay said, we had to get JJ. He wasn't safe with her. Kay tells the jury that Charles was cremated and sent by FedEx to her business office with his letterman's jacket from high school, some cheap sunglasses, and some cheap watches. She said Charles had a big watch collection and said Lori just sent some crap. Lori, again, shaking her head no. They set up a service for Charles for August the 3rd, 2019. She last talked to Lori trying to be nice, and she said it was hard because I knew she had something to do with his murder. Lori told Kay they could go to Houston to get what they wanted of Charles's, but when they got there, there was nothing there other than big furniture, the beds, everything else was gone. The life insurance company called her to let her know she was the sole beneficiary of Charles's account, asked for her address where they could send the check. Lori texted Kay a photo of the change of beneficiary form with Kay's name on it and said 5 kids and his sister gets all the money. Is that why you wanted JJ? Kay said that was a dumb statement by her. She had Colby and Tylee and JJ. Colby was out of the house. She did not have 5 kids she was caring for. They wanted JJ there for Charles's service. So Kay offered to fly to Arizona, pick JJ up, keep him there for a week and bring him back. And that was agreed to by Lori. But when Lori found out she was not the beneficiary and Kay was, Lori said they're moving to Hawaii. It would be confusing for JJ and he needed to be with her. Lori on cross. Y'all, I'm going to link a YouTube short in the description here. You have to hear what Kay says when the judge says cross and Lori's up. Lori, where were you July 11th, 2019? Lake Charles, Louisiana. Were you aware of the relationship between Tylee and Charles? Kay admits it was contentious, but Charles didn't say too much about it. Lori, you weren't aware of the events of July the 11th? Kay, no, because you didn't tell me. I'm going to play the last question and the last answer between Lori and Kay and let you hear it with your own ears.
Did you see or hear or personally witness me conspire with Alex Cox to kill my husband, Charles Vallow?
No, but I saw a ton of evidence that did.
Thank you. No further questions.
I will tell you guys, everybody in that courtroom, I think, wanted to stand up and clap when she said that. You know, you think about it, even after everything Lori has taken from Kay, her grandson, her brother, huge chunk of her life, their lives will never be the same. Kay still got on that stand and talked about the good qualities of Lori before all this happened. On a redirect, the state asked on July 11th, did you have any idea Charles was dead? Kay said none. How would I know? It wasn't from her. We found out from Google. And that was the end of testimony. And Kay very much honored her brother Charles today. So we will see what next week brings. No court on Fridays. And on Monday and Tuesday of next week, we will start at 10 a.m., not 10:30, which means you guys will get the stream starting at 10:30. Come watch on the channel. We have great mods who I appreciate being there for hours every day, making sure the chat runs as it should, honoring the victims. I appreciate all y'all. I'm going to enjoy the weekend with my daughter, and I'm not going to think about Lori Daybell until Monday. You guys have a great rest of your evening. Have a good weekend, and we will see you Monday.